So you might be just getting into motorcycles, you might be doing a lot of research on the internet, and you're wondering, is the Iron 883 a good first bike for you? Well, let's talk about the Iron 883 and its pros and cons, and let's find out if this is the right bike for you. All right, so stay tuned. What is up, YouTube? Welcome back to the channel. Well, today I thought we'd talk a little bit about the Sportster here, a little about the Iron 883. And, you know, whether or not this bike is a good beginner bike for you, whether you're just getting into motorcycles or you've been on the fence a little bit, you know, and researching like me. Like, you know, I have a little experience in this. I'm a fairly new rider. I've been riding for about 6 months, and the Iron was my first motorcycle. And if you're a little bit like me, you know, you've probably been looking around the internet, watching YouTube videos, trying to figure out what would be a good first bike, beginner bike for you. So the short answer to whether or not this is a good starter bike is, yeah, it is. And like maybe, and well, it depends a little bit on a few factors, mostly about yourself. But before we get into the longer answer, if you're new here, if you wouldn't mind hitting that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that comment section below, and hit that bell. And that'd be great. We appreciate it because it helps out the channel a lot. So yeah, if you're a new rider, or you're just like looking into getting into motorcycles, you're probably a little bit like me and, you know, interested in getting a new bike. So 6 months ago, I was in the same boat. I was looking on the internet. I wanted to ride motorcycles and get into it, so watching YouTube videos from Blockheads, Shade Tree Surgeon, Flipna, all those guys, you know, just the whole motorcycle culture on YouTube was really awesome, and it lends itself to a lot of knowledge that I acquired in a short amount of time that I don't think I could have gotten anywhere else but YouTube. And the Iron 83 really spoke to me as the kind of motorcycle that I wanted to get. And, you know, the first thing I did was went to a Harley dealership and I sat on a Iron 883. And that was the first step into what I felt like the Iron 883 was a good fit for me. So the things I noticed right away about the Iron, though, was that I'm a taller guy. I'm 6'3", and the way the Iron came out stock with the mid controls just didn't work for me. I also sat on a 48, which had forward controls on it, which, you know, I really liked the 48. There were some things I didn't like about it, but I did like the forward controls. And what it led me to believe is that, well, if I can get an Iron 83 and put forward controls on it, that would probably be a good fit. So it all depends on you and whether or not this bike works. Now, some other factors that I really liked about the Iron was its kind of cheaper price point into entry. I didn't want to spend a lot on a first bike because I didn't want to get anything too big. I didn't want to get anything too powerful. I didn't want to drive beyond my limits. Getting some giant, you know, high horsepower, heavy bike was probably not the best idea for a beginner. You know, with the Iron 83, you're not talking about a super powerful engine. You know, you're talking about 50-ish horsepower, 50 pounds of torque, somewhere in there, roughly. Don't quote me on that. But I felt like it wasn't going to be over my head as a beginner to drive the Iron 83. So the other good thing about that, though, is that with the fairly lower cost to entry into the Iron 83, if you're so mechanically inclined, you can upgrade the Iron 83 later with a 1250 kit, 1275 kit for fairly cheap and get into a bigger engine like a 1200 without spending a whole lot of money. And you'd save a lot off the top, you know, not having to spend outright for a 1200. You know, there's a plus to starting with an Iron because you can spend less for a used Iron 883, and then eventually you could upgrade it to a 1200 if you're so inclined. Now, the con there is if you're not mechanically inclined and you don't want to do that, or you don't have the means to do that, you know, that option might not be the best for you. But for me, you know, I like projects. I'm good mechanically. You know, I'm not a mechanic, but I'm not afraid to get in there and modify the bike how I see fit. So, you know, so that's a pro. So if you're good with the wrench, you know, you might want to think about it. You know, start with an 83, upgrade it later on. Plus, you know, there is another little bit of a benefit. Insurance costs on the 883 are lower than a 1200. This bike is pretty cheap to insure. The bigger the engine you put into a bike, the more insurance will cost. And the cool thing is if you get an 883 and then future upgrade it to like a 1250 or 1275, the bike is still registered as an 883, you're still going to pay the cheaper insurance rates. So that is a pro. So the con side of this whole conversation would be whether or not you're not mechanically inclined, you don't want to wrench on a bike. You know, I just want to buy a motorcycle, I just want to ride. I really don't care about upgrading, I don't want to mod anything. I just want to get out and go. So, you know, the 883 is a good bike for that as well, but you might find it to be underpowered in a couple years or a year or so. You know, there's a huge used market for Iron 83s because so many people outgrow them so fast. They drive them for a year, they put about anywhere from 3,000 to 5,000 miles on them, and they trade them in for something bigger. Sometimes this bike is just not what people envisioned. So, you know, they outgrow it and they don't want to wrench on it and they don't want to upgrade it. So they buy something bigger. Maybe this riding style isn't for them. So if you feel like your riding style is going to be more, you know, longer distance, you know, you want something with a little more comfort, you know, the Iron 83 is probably not going to be a good fit. It's not a long distance bike by any means. I mean, you can do it. I'm not saying you can't do it. You of course can go any distance on any bike. It's just the long-term comfort on it. The suspension, the stock suspension is pretty, you know, rough. But yeah, the Iron is a great bike overall. And I think you really need to look at your wants in a bike as a beginner bike. The Iron definitely meets a lot of beginner qualifications. So yeah, I definitely think you need to go to a dealership, sit on a bunch of bikes. Sit on a Sportster, sit on everything that interest you, feel it out, because every bike is going to feel a little bit different, and they're all going to be a little different. So even though if you don't, even if you're not a rider yet, you need to go sit on a bike. And it's important you sit on a bike and feel comfortable, not awkward, and you can, you know, that you don't feel cramped up and you don't feel like uncomfortable, because you're going to be on this thing and you know, you need to feel good about it. So yeah, you know, I love this bike. You know, I have no plans on selling it. You know, I do have plans on upgrading it, and I am definitely going to do the 1275 kit with all the headwork, and I kind of want to turn this Sportster into a really top-end, you know, high-end Sportster with a lot of power. You might be saying, well, why don't you just trade it in, upgrade to something like a Lowrider S, you know, and do like a 131 kit on it, you know, and have like a hell of a lot more power. I'm not saying I don't think about getting a different bike, but I also don't feel like I want to sell this bike. As I said before in other videos, I think of the Iron 83 as like a classic Harley iconic brand bike. The Evo engine is like seriously one of the like last of its kind. You know, it's loud, it shakes, it rumbles, the whole bike vibrates. It's just a fun bike overall to ride. At one point I probably might want to get a different bike, but not replace this bike. But I feel like I would just have two bikes. Yeah, and if you're like, you know, following my journey here, you know, I've made this into a like more like a solo bobber-like bike, you know, with the, I'm going to do the chop fender and so forth. And, you know, it's a little bit like I do want maybe a second bike that has like a two-up scenario where I can bring my my wife and, you know, go places with her. Right now I can't put anyone else on this bike, and I don't plan on that. So this will be my like fast, fun bike once I do the 1275 upgrade, you know. So that's like the really cool thing about the Sportster is like you can really make this anything you want. You can keep it two up. You can, you know, do what I'm doing, which is like cutting it up and adding all kinds of mods to it, or you can keep it stock. either way, you know, it's just a fun bike overall to just tool around with. And this is a great bike if you like to wrench. You know, if you like to wrench on your bike, this is a great bike to do that on. It's a lot of fun. You know, if you've been watching any of my other videos, you've seen like what I've done. I bought this bike stock, and you know, I've upgraded so many things on it already, and it's a fun hobby, I guess you'd call it, because you know, you're personalizing this bike to exactly the way you want it. So, you know, the last thing I'll talk about before in this video, which, you know, I'm probably getting a little long, but so if you're going to get a new bike for your first bike, I highly recommend you don't buy brand new. Don't go to a dealer and buy a 2020 or 2021 Iron 883, because you're going to pay way too much for it. And, you know, if you're not sure if you're going to stay with this bike, let somebody else take the depreciation hit and buy a used bike. There are so many Iron 883s, there are so many Iron 1200s, there are so many used bikes on the market that you can save so much cash in getting a used bike. If you're more comfortable buying from a dealer, they have plenty of used options. There's always an Iron in the pre-owned section. You're always going to find something. You can save even more cash if you buy from a private seller. Always an Iron for sale on Facebook Marketplace, Cycle Trader. Anywhere you look, you're going to find a used bike. They generally have pretty low miles. They're usually in really good condition. A lot of times you find them stock. Sometimes you find them slightly modded. Depends. It depends on what you want to do, because people do outgrow the bike and they do sell them. So, like I said, it depends on what you envision your style going to be. Like if you want a brand new stock bike, probably buy from a dealer. You're probably going to more likely find a used stock bike from them. If you go to a private seller, you might find a little bit of an older bike. It's maybe a few more miles on it, and it's got some more mods on it. So you just got to do your research. You know, like I bought this bike from a private seller, but it was still stock and it only had 5,000 miles on it. So, you know, it's fairly new. It's a 2017. It's all about what you want to do. So, and, you know, this bike is a great starter bike. But be sure to do your due diligence in trying out and sitting on as many bikes as you can. Go to a dealer, sit on the bikes. Just, you know, don't let them talk you out of it. Don't let them, you know, try to convince you to buy something you're not interested in. You know, just take your time. Don't rush into it. Sit on some bikes, and eventually you'll find the bike that's right for you. And that's the most important thing, is to find the bike that is right for you. Because in the end, this is a whole lot of fun, and you want to be comfortable, and you want to be able to just enjoy being out on the road and having a good time. That's my whole thoughts on whether or not the Iron 883 is a great beginner bike. And like I said, it is, but it also depends. It depends on you and whether or not this bike fits your criteria for a new bike. So like I said, go sit on a bike, try it out. But thanks for watching YouTube, and I appreciate it. You know, once again, hit that subscribe button, hit that like button, hit that comment section below. Tell me what your first bike was. You know, was it an Iron, or is it something else? You know, how did you get into motorcycles? What was your first bike? You know, and hit that bell, make it go ring-a-ding. And I'll see you on the next one, YouTube. I appreciate you watching, and you keep riding, stay safe, and I'll see you. All right, see you, YouTube. All right, peace.